Okay, there it goes. Hi everyone, my name is Katie, and I have the honor of doing something that I didn't quite understand why it needed to be done, but I decided to just soldier up and help out. So my job is to help you understand how to make a 4-ingredient mocktail. And I want you to view this as kind of a cognitive test. So if you can't really wrap your brain around this, I'm going to suggest that maybe you're going to miss a lot of the stories that are coming up and are kind of the main point. So pay very close attention to what I'm going to do so that you get it and you know how to suck it up, because that's what a lemon lime mocktail is all about. Now, if you paid $125 to receive a copy of the recipe, I guess I'm here for the lumpen proletariat who didn't do that. But if you received a copy of the recipe, you may be asking yourselves, why didn't they tell me about a cutting board? I don't have any. Go get one quickly. You're going to need that. Why didn't they tell me about a knife? You're going to need that as well. I'm trying to help you out. But remember, this is not limeade or lemonade. It's a lemon lime mocktail. Okay, here we go. I only have 40 minutes, so let's get right into it because it's complex. It's deceiving. All right, first thing, take your fruit, okay? After you've made sure that you have your bushel of mint, your honey, your seltzer, your cup, and you've got this with your donation, your juicer. The first thing you want to do is decide, and this is a key decision point in the process, am I going to go with the lemon first or am I going to go with the lime? I've chosen the lemon, and after identifying the ends, I'm going to put it on the cutting board and I'm going to slice it directly in half, okay? Just to keep it moist, I'm turning it upside down. I'm going to go here again with the lime. I'm going to do the two ends and make sure I am cutting right down the middle. Hopefully your knife is sharper than this one. All right, now remember it's a lemon lime mocktail, so you're going to alternate. You put your fruit in the cute little thing. You get your cup. You go like this. Some people are already going to have crushed ice in. Ta-da! Like so. And then quickly take that out. You put this in. That's the lime. You're going to go like so. Be very careful. See what I mean? It's a little tricky. There you go. And I didn't tell you this part. You're supposed to be keeping this intact for the garnish. Get your honey. 3 teaspoons. I need a little more sweetener tonight. And then the recipe says water. I think that's boring. I'm going with seltzer. Fill it up, but not all the way, folks. Like so. I'm not even going to talk to you about a cocktail. This is only a mocktail. You're on your own if you want to go deeper and stiffer. And then, while it says handful of Flashman, I think a swig is better. Stir it up. Crush a little in. Voila. Enjoy and have a great evening. I'm turning it back to DJ Huppah.
Thank you, Katie, for that amazing mocktail instruction. We'll be playing some music that you can enjoy for the next 5 minutes till we begin Havdalah.
Okay.
Young people speak in their minds are getting so much resistance from behind. Every time we stop, hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. What a field day for the heat. 1,000 people in the street, singing songs and a carrying signs. mostly say hooray for our side. It's time we stop. Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going now. Paranoia strikes deep into your life, it will creep. It starts when you're always afraid. Step out of line, the man come and take you away. We better stop. Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going now. We better stop. Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going. We better stop now. What's that sound? Everybody look what's going. We better stop. Children, what's that sound? Here comes the sun, little darling. Here comes the sun. I say it's alright. It's alright. Here comes the sun, little darling. Here comes the sun. I say it's alright. It's alright. Little darling, it's been a long, cold and lonely winter. Little darling, it feels like years since you've been here. Here comes the sun, little darling. Here comes the sun. I say it's alright. It's alright. Little darling, the smiles are returning to the faces now. Little darling, it seems like years since you've been here. Little darling, it's been a long, cold, lonely winter. Little darling, feels like years since you've been here. Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun. I'm so glad to see it. I see. It's alright.
Good evening, everyone. I have to say I'm delighted to be back in our space and to be with our fantastic co-presidents, Raquel Rosenblatt, Jocelyn Gordon, our storytellers, and their friends. Before we begin, we're going to say goodbye to Shabbat with Havdalah, which means we're squeezing like that lemon, those last few drops of Shabbat before we go into the week. And as I think about Shabbat, this year of pandemic in a way has been a kind of Shabbat, a kind of pause. And with all the hardships and the difficulties, many of us have found something you might call resilience to get through it. So this is an opportunity for us to remember that every week we can be renewed by Shabbat, by those lessons we've learned during the pandemic. And the resilience comes when we light this flame and we douse it in the wine or the grape juice to say, we're going back into it. And gradually, we as a congregation are coming back. We have a few more people in the sanctuary than we've had for some time. And we will be coming back with resilience. So I invite everyone on Zoom, as I say every time we do some form of prayer or study, to be with us here. Create the holy space that connects us all. And you can all sing along as loudly as you like when you're on mute. And I'm also going to say to those who are here who are wearing masks, you can sing along with me as well. That would be wonderful. La 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 Shavua Tov, 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 Shavua Tov. A good week, a week of peace. May gladness reign and joy increase. A good week, a week of peace. May gladness reign and joy increase. May we all be blessed with whatever it is that enables us to step out of these last moments of rest and to enter into the week back into the world with renewed vigor and renewed joy and hope. Shavua Tov. Shavua Tov.
Thank you so much, Rabbi, for that beautiful Havdalah, which helps us to transition to this very special evening. Welcome, Temple HBT family and friends. My name is Jocelyn Gordon, and I am a co-president here at Temple Hillel B'nai Torah.
And I am Raquel Rosenblatt, also co-president of this incredible congregation. We are thrilled to welcome you to our Rising with Resilience Story Slam, coming to you live from Temple HBT's beautiful sanctuary. It is such a treat to be here and see the results of our Shevet Achim Gam Yachad Sanctuary Renewal Campaign. Many thanks to so many of you for generously supporting this transformation. And we all look forward to the day when we can be back here in this beautiful space together.
We also want to express our deepest gratitude for your generosity for tonight's event. You are providing vital support for all the programs and activities that make Temple HBT such a thriving community all year long. And if you have not yet made a gift, or you are inspired to make another contribution, you can do that now and throughout the evening on our website at www.templehbt.org by clicking on the donate button at the top of the page. Thank you again for your support.
You know, from our first HBT Story Slams a number of years ago, we saw the power of spoken word. We felt the energy, joy, and in some stories, heartbreak when we listened to our storytellers. Without giving anything away, we can assure you, you are in for a treat tonight.
Our Story Slam is a celebration of the theme of resilience, something each one of us has experienced over the past year. Resilience is in all of us. When we face a challenge or a hardship, we need to remember that we can rise with a grace and a strength that comes from this resilience. Each of tonight's stories perfectly captures this theme.
In addition to the storytellers, there were other HBT members who dedicated time and energy to prepare for tonight. Our fantastic planning committee was led by Jean Weinberg and included Benita Block, Amy Gerber, Dana Rubin, Laurie Schloff, and Tammy Schneider. Jana Cohen-Rosenthal, Adam Goldstein, Bruce Mallory, Ayla Rich, Jan Snitzer, and Christy Wybad provided important technology, design, communications, and stage management support. And we hope you benefited from the expertise of Katie Abel, who guided us in making a resilient cocktail when we were waiting for tonight's event to start. We want to share a very special thank you to our entire Temple HBT board for so generously supporting tonight's event and for your critical leadership. And last but never least, many thanks to Moreno Guzman for setting up the sanctuary tonight for us to be here and for his tremendous efforts every day.
Usually, when we are in the sanctuary for Zoom services or a program, participants can unmute themselves throughout the event. Tonight, we are asking everyone to remain muted throughout the evening instead of applauding after each individual storyteller. The tellers are, however, here with family members who can and will applaud on your behalf. Please feel free to share words of congratulations and support to our storytellers in the chat. Tonight's program will include 6 stories interspersed with music brought to you by DJ Huppah. We'll conclude the evening with a dance party and also the option to go into a breakout room with audience members to connect and catch up.
It is now our pleasure to introduce Dana Rubin, Temple HBT board member and curator of tonight's Story Slam. Dana's incredible dedication and determination brought us to this evening. Thank you so much, Dana, for all you did to create this special Story Slam community.
Thank you for that kind introduction. Welcome to Story Slam 2021. Got the year. The Jewish people have always loved a good story, filled with meaning, metaphors, and always humor. And we, members of Temple HBT, we're no different. We, too, have our stories to tell. During this time of COVID, we have been fighting a deadly virus, as well as the ills of racism and injustice, here and abroad. We have been working to keep our families intact and searching for ways to help our children grow while being socially distanced. We have pivoted zoomed, and retooled. Each one of us has so many stories. A few years ago, HBT invited nationally recognized storyteller and activist Judith Black to teach us the art of storytelling. Many of you have taken her classes and shared your stories with the community. And for those who have not had the pleasure of participating in a workshop, learning to tell a story, well, it's a process. Through movement, visual arts, soul-searching, and many do-overs, participants do find their stories. This year, we asked participants to consider the theme of resilience. Everyone chose a story, a brief moment, or a lifetime challenge. And although very different, each demonstrates ways to manage in difficult times. I want to thank everyone who helped to plan the storytelling workshop and tonight's Story Slam, particularly our storytellers. But as we begin, I ask you to take a deep breath. Let it out slowly and be present as our storytellers tell their stories. So for our first group, I'd like to introduce Ann Steinman and Rabbi Barbara Penzner. Ann will tell us about a story called The Impossible Dream. But first, Rabbi Barbara will tell us a story that just wasn't on the itinerary.
I was standing on the beach, my toes in the sand, the water lapping at the shore, looking out on the far horizon of the Gulf of Finland. It was not on the itinerary. The day before had been Shabbat, and my husband Brian and our friend Sharon Kleinbaum, who was a rabbinical student along with me at the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College, we were sitting in Leningrad in the Grand Synagogue for Shabbat services. The three of us had been invited to go to Moscow, Leningrad, and Kiev to visit refuseniks. All of us had been active in the Soviet Jewry movement, but this was an unusual time. It was May 1987. This was in the time of Gorbachev, and the people who were sending us wanted to know what was changing. They sent us there to meet refuseniks and to find out what their lives were like at that point. And we were instructed for several weeks about how we were to behave. We were given items to bring to them. Because these were Jews who were learning about Judaism or trying to practice Judaism in a country where it wasn't legal, we brought books and ritual objects. Because they were refuseniks and had asked permission to leave the Soviet Union, they had no income. So we brought them personal items like toothpaste and dental floss, and we also brought things like jeans for them to sell. We were given specific instructions on how to get through customs. And if people asked, why are you bringing so many Jewish books? We would say, it's for my personal use. We were given very explicit instructions about how to contact people. And in those weeks of preparation, I took extensive notes in my little date book in code that I can't even understand anymore, with their names, their phone numbers, their addresses, what we were bringing to them. We were told, be sure not to speak about what you're doing in the hotel room because they're probably bugged. Be sure when you call them, you go to a phone booth. And most important, do not speak to anyone but the people whose names are in your book. We got through customs. We went to Moscow, we visited people, and we're sitting in the synagogue in Leningrad Shabbat morning. Of course, like most of you, we arrived late in the middle of the Torah service. And, like just about everybody I know, we were sitting in the back row. I can't remember much of the service at that point, except that we were in this very grand old synagogue in Leningrad, when someone tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Do you want to meet Jews?" Well, that's why we were there, of course, was to meet Jews. But who is this person sitting behind me? Our first thought was he could have been KGB. We talked to him. His name was Lev Ludin. He was in his 20s, like us. And we got friendly with him, with a little caution. And then he said to us, "Why don't you meet me tomorrow at the Leningrad train station? And we're going to go out to a dacha, a country home, of someone in our group." Okay. This was not on our itinerary. This was a risk we were going to take. And yet the next day, the three of us found ourselves at the Leningrad train station, and we met Lev and some friends. Now, our visas did not permit us to leave Leningrad. And yet we decided to take this risk to meet these young people who were traveling out to this dacha. We imagined this beautiful summer home because it was the first spring day of May and everyone was going out to the country. They had chosen this day because they knew from the little Jewish study they had done that it was Lag BaOmer, a day of celebration in the spring. And as far as they knew, Lag BaOmer is a time you go out, you have a picnic, and you shoot bows and arrows. Got on the train with them, it was packed. We went 15 miles on the train to our stop, and then we got out and walked another 2 miles to the dacha. When we got there, it was more like a very big garden and a very little house amid many other houses. There were a number of other people there, mostly young people who were beginning to learn Hebrew from photographed pages of Hebrew books. They were eager to learn, but they were not on anyone's list, definitely not in our book. And we started talking in every language that we knew. Around the table, Sharon was over here speaking Yiddish, a sheinem dank. Over there, I was working on my Russian and my Hebrew, spasiba, toda rabba. And Brian was doing his very best with English, thank you very much. We drank, we ate, we taught. Then we started teaching songs. And everyone got up and we started doing an Israeli dance together. There was such a feeling of freedom in the air on this beautiful spring day, and toward the end of the day, we all walked down a path down to the beach, to the Gulf of Finland. And there, we took our shoes off, and they started writing in the sand their Hebrew names. And then they erased them. It was time for us to walk back. We were feeling giddy from the events of the day and that sense of freedom. And as we walked down the path, suddenly a hush came over the whole group. We got in single file and we stood very straight because up ahead, coming toward us, was a Russian soldier. We were all in danger at that moment. We were not supposed to be outside of Leningrad. They were not supposed to be talking to foreigners. And I did my very best not to look like a tourist. We got past the soldier without incident. We returned on the train to Leningrad. We met Lev Ludin once again before moving on to Kiev and seeing more refuseniks. He wasn't on the itinerary. But I have to say that from that encounter, I learned more than on that entire trip about what it means to live under oppression and to choose freedom.
Oh God. Thanks for the music. Let me put my yarmulke back on. Oh God, you know my father's an accountant, but why of all days did you take him from me on April 15th? Now every year, his death is doubly taxing for me and my family. If only he had filed his 2000 extension on time with you, but he was too sick in the hospital. But God, I don't mean to complain, but why couldn't you find a group home in New Orleans for my brother Arnold, who has autism? 250 miles away from my mom and dad's house? That's crazy. For most people, it's a 5-hour drive. But for my dad, it always took him 8 hours. My mom, she doesn't drive, so no more monthly visits. Now my poor mom can only see my brother when I go to New Orleans to visit her. What? Me? Move to New Orleans? But I'm comfortable here, in Boston, with my wife Susan. And besides, God, who's going to blow the chauffeur at HBT? Of course, Claudia. But God, I have a dream. A dream of bringing my family here so we can all be together. It's not going to be easy. In fact, it may be impossible. I may fail, but I must try. So I went on a mission to find a group home for my brother in Boston. I was determined, I was optimistic. Let's face it, I was naive. We don't have any, your application has to be on hold. We don't have any the records from Louisiana. It's too cold to move your brother here. Wait until spring. Who said that it's the springtime that we can find a house for your brother? Don't you know there's a waiting list of people who have been waiting for 5 or 10 years? I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do to help you. Your brother needs to be a Massachusetts resident in order to get on the waiting list. But if he moves in with you, can he? That's what I went through for 5 years. In 2005, my mother had a stroke. a few months later, not a few months later, it was shortly time after, Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans. My mother's house was flooded with 10 feet of water. Even her bedroom was flooded. Thank God my mother was not home at the time. My mom was recovering at a Jewish rehab. But I didn't know if it was flooded. All the phone lines were down. Couldn't find out what's going on. I didn't know people being evacuated. People going in the city, out of the city. I had no news. I got worried. And then it was late at night. I called Jewish Federation in California to see if they had any information about my mom. And they did. I found our mother was safe and sound in Texas. Who knew that having a stroke would save your life? But a monkey wrench went right into my dream. Now my mother's even further away. And I didn't know how. I was determined to bring my mother and brother here. I wasn't sure quite how to do it. My wife Susan to the rescue. Anne, did you hear the news? The Cape Cod Air Force Base is now accepting a Katrina evacuees. They're setting up temporary housing. If you can get your mom into that program, maybe that will be the key to get your brother here. Two weeks later, it was actually 2 days later, my mother arrived at Cape Cod. She was exhausted from all the trauma, but still she was determined to use her walker. This was the second time in Mom's life that she was a refugee. My mom fled Nazi Germany when she was a little girl, and now she has to leave her only son behind. This is one resilient woman. Massachusetts moved mountains to help get my mother back on the street. They found her a nice apartment in Brookline near KI and the butchery. And even though they cared deeply about my brother's plight, there was nothing they can do for him because he was not a victim of the hurricane, at least not directly. Oh God, oh God, oh God. My brother is trapped in Louisiana. There's nothing more I can do. God hears our prayers. Sometimes the answer is mysterious. So when I prayed to God and asked God for help, what did the creator of the universe do? Sends another hurricane. This time, Hurricane Rita hit the home where my brother was staying, and miraculously, just like that, my brother's put on top of the list for group home housing in Massachusetts. Wonders and wonders, miracles and miracles. Who's going to get my brother to Beantown? Well, God needed me to help with one other little way to get this done. I had to do one little thing. I had to go to Big Easy to get my brother. It wasn't that easy, but I went there anyway. Arnold and I flew back, and we had to change planes in the Atlanta airport. Excuse me, pardon me. Can you please tell me how I get to my connecting flight? Okay. Okay, Arnold, Arnold? Oh my God! I lost my brother in the busiest airport in the world! What if someone shoots him? Security does not know that he has autism. brother's walking through the airport, pushing a little cart right in front of him, bumping into people along the way. And he walks straight towards the boarding gate of another plane. And security stops him. Attention, attention. Will passenger Ann Steinman please report to gate 18A? Your brother is waiting for you. Thank you. My brother and I, we arrived at my mom's house late that night. And my mom had a big smile on her face and a tear in her eye. I had brought Arnold home. It only took 2 hurricanes and 1 flood to bring my family together and make my impossible dream come true. If that's not a miracle, I don't know what is.
Thank you so much, Rabbi and Ann. That was great. For our next group, I'd like to introduce David Brenner and Laurie Rotman. Laurie will tell us her story entitled One Step at a Time. But first, David Brenner has a lot to teach us about leverage.
Let me take you back to the last century. 1984, to be precise. The labor movement in Boston was going through an amazing transformation. The hotel workers had shifted their focus from the front of the house to the back of the house. The Harvard Union of Clerical and Technical Workers in Cambridge were about to organize and score a huge victory that would upset the captains of capitalism. And me? Well, I was trying to revitalize a small, moribund local of laundry union workers in New England. Workers who were in large commercial and industrial laundries. Working in a laundry, it's hard work. You're exposed to toxic chemicals, heat, low levels of radiation, human waste. It's a challenging place to work. And the people? Well, in Boston, it's Cape Verdean, Dominican, Haitian, African American. It's a real mix. Now, the drivers in these shops were predominantly white men, Teamsters. And for decades, the Teamsters Union and my local, the laundry workers, never talked to each other. But for 3 years, I began to go around the shops in New England and get people more involved in what it meant to be in a union, filing grievances, having meetings, negotiating contracts, and reaching out to unions, other unions, including the Teamsters. Now, there were 2 locals for the Teamsters, Local 25 with George Cashman, and Local 170 in Worcester with Billy Miley. And George and Billy and I met in George's office one day and talked about, wow, what a difference it would make if we actually worked together on a contract negotiation. And Billy had a contract that was expiring for his plant, for his shop in Worcester. And we went to the plant that was associated with that in Roxbury and said, you know what? If the Teamsters go on strike, we should honor their picket line and work together. And that will give them and us, for our contract, a lot of leverage. And people agreed to do that, which is a really big thing to do when you're a low-wage worker, because you don't have a lot in the bank. You're living from paycheck to paycheck. And to take that step, to make that commitment, is a big deal. Now, Billy, he went back to the employer during his negotiations and said, look, if we don't get what we're looking for, we're going to strike. And the laundry workers, they're coming with us. The company's lawyer looked at him and scoffed, said, that's not going to happen. Never happened, can't happen, won't happen. Billy said, I'm telling you right now, if we strike, the laundry workers are coming with us. Well, Billy's contract, the Teamster contract, those drivers, their contract expired. They went out on strike, and on the morning that they struck, they went down to the plant on Mass Ave, still there, it's across the street from the fire department headquarters. And the laundry workers honored their picket line, and they stayed out. And it was amazing. Shock and awe, euphoric. People really felt the power of being in the street, of being together, something they hadn't done before. First day, second day, third day, people are starting to get nervous. Some of the workers came to me and they said, look, David, we understand why we did this, but we thought it would just be a couple of days. If we miss a paycheck, how am I going to pay the rent? How are we going to feed the kids? We talked, and I said, look, we have our own negotiations later today. Let's see how that goes first. Now, we're also doing something a little bit different. We decided we were going to bargain what's called a fishbowl. So instead of a little committee privately hiding in a room or quietly in a room, we rented the ballroom at the old Howard Johnson's on the Southeast Expressway. And yes, there was a ballroom in the Howard Johnson's on the Southeast Expressway. And we took all the workers, both laundry workers and Teamsters from the picket line, and we went down to that ballroom. We filled the room. Every wall had someone standing in front of it. We had a table in the middle. On one side was the employer and his committee and his lawyer, and on the other side was our committee. We had the Teamster reps. My partner, Gene Bruskin, who was a recovering school bus driver, as the organizer, was sitting next to me. And we began negotiations. But the attorney for the company, the guy who said that we would never honor the Teamster picket line, he decided he was going to school us on negotiations, on bargaining. And he turned to me and he said, you know, David, negotiating a contract, it's like doing your laundry. You've got to keep your whites and your colors separate. There was a pause in the room. And he knew what he said, and I watched the blood drain from his face as he turned white as a sheet. And then the room exploded. You can't say that! What the? And a lot of other things, which I won't say right now. And it was amazing. And they quickly picked up their papers, threw them in their briefcases, and they were out the door. We then had a conversation. And in that moment, something shifted. We had been losing the leverage that we had when we started, but because of that incredibly inappropriate, wrong, disgusting comment, the tide changed. And people were invigorated. They were not going to be disrespected. And so for the next 3 weeks, people walked the picket line. Production workers, laundry workers, Teamsters together. The Teamsters brought in a tractor trailer filled with donated groceries. We did fundraisers, we got strike benefits, and 3 weeks later, people, the workers, the Teamsters, the production, all together walked back into that plant with a new contract that had a 20% increase in their wages. It was amazing. Fast forward 3 years. We go through into negotiations again. Nobody wants a problem. Everyone wants this resolved very quickly. We negotiate the contract. I think we're all set. And I'm about to start a new chapter in my life. Katie and I have just had our first son, Sam. I'm about to take a paternity leave, head off to law school in the fall, and life is good. But my phone rings. David, it's Arthur. We have a problem. What is it, Arthur? Now, Arthur was the attorney for the local. There's a glitch in the contract. There's a clause. They say they're not going to agree. I need you to come down and help us fix this. Arthur, I can't do that. I've got the baby. I don't have childcare. David, bring the kid. Sam gets packed up, we put him in the car seat, I put him in the car seat, 2.5 months old. I go, I get the diaper bag, some of Katie's milk, put in some diapers, drive downtown, 50 Congress Street, elevator, 5th floor, walk into the conference room, pop Sam on the table. For the next 3 hours, we're negotiating this contract. Back and forth, was the word a or was the word and? Who knows? Who cares? This is probably more about ego than anything else. But after 3 hours, I realized I've got a problem. And I turn to these 3 lawyers whose child-rearing years are long behind them, and I say to them, gentlemen, I am out of diapers and I am out of milk. You have 10 minutes to fix this problem. 15 minutes later, my little bundle of leverage sleeping quietly in the backseat of my car, as he and I drive down Starrow Drive, heading home for what turned out to be yet another fantastic summer and great adventure. Thank you very much.
We all know the expression, to forgive or to forget. But in my experience, there have been times when I can't forgive or forget, and I needed to forge another path. And that other path has been to rise with resilience. And I've discovered that resilience doesn't always happen all at once, but it can happen in stages, just one step at a time. So here's my story. It's the mid-1970s, and I'm living in Toronto with my then boyfriend, as we were in graduate school at the time. I thought he was the love of my life, but he was both physically and emotionally abusive, and it nearly destroyed me. In my head, I knew that I had to leave, but in my heart, I just could not figure out how to do that. He was a very intense and energetic person, and when he focused his positive attention on me, I felt like the center of the universe. The other problem about trying to leave was the context of the time. There were definitely stories of physical abuse in the newspapers, but they were in families that were experiencing unemployment, alcoholism, poverty, certainly not in households like mine, upper middle class, educated, Jewish families. And there was no infrastructure at the time for me to reach out to. The other problem was much more personal. I felt that I couldn't reach out for support to family and friends because of my own feelings of shame and guilt. Shame that I had gotten myself into this situation in the first place, and guilt that somehow this was my fault. That sense of guilt was hammered into me on a regular basis. You know, Laurie, if you look at this logically and analytically, this is really all your fault. You know, the expression on your face, your tone of voice, something that you've said to contradict me, that causes me to hit you. So clearly it's not me, but it's you. So my reaction to that was to walk on eggshells, to be so careful about everything that I said and did and every expression on my face. But it made absolutely no difference. And you know, Laurie, I just want you to know that I'm really careful about how I hit you, so there are no bruises to be seen. When I hit you in the face, it's with the flat of my hand, not my fist. And when I hit you on your body, I do hit you with my fist, but not anywhere where bruises would be seen. To me, that was such a betrayal. Not only was he losing his temper at me, but he was actually conscious and aware of what he was doing. How could somebody who I thought loved me treat me this way? Over time, the violence increased in both intensity and frequency. And there was one night in particular that stands out in my memory. He had thrown this heavy boot at me, and it hit me in the leg. And I realized at that point that I needed to get out of the apartment, that I was really actually in danger. So I started running to the front door, and he grabbed me and tackled me, threw me on the ground, and somehow dragged me into the living room. He was sitting on top of me and just taking my head and dropping it onto the carpet, and taking his fists and pummeling my body with blows. At that point, I had this out-of-body experience with my head somewhere on the ceiling looking down at this horrific scene. And what did I see? I saw this young woman who looked exactly like me, trying to protect herself from the blows. It was horrific. The only good thing that I could say about that night was that now my head and my heart were aligned, and I knew that I had to get out. It still took a few months, but one morning I woke up, I left the apartment, and I just took one step after the other and forged a new life for myself. And it was a good life. I had a wonderful family, great friends, a community, a good job. And yet, there was something about my past that was still haunting me. I felt like a victim, and I felt all the accompanying feelings of victimhood, the shame, the guilt, the fear. And I knew that I had to let these go because these feelings were eroding my sense of self-worth. And it took a long time. It took years, maybe even decades. But gradually, with the support of friends and family and a very good therapist, I gradually started on the journey of regaining my sense of self-esteem. Now, my journey culminated in a weekend yoga retreat in Vermont a few years ago. On the first day, we were challenged with climbing up this very, very steep mountain. And I just took one step at a time and made it to the top. And I was so proud of myself because here I was in my early 60s, and I made it to the top along with the 20 and 30-year-old very fit yogis. And when I looked out at this gorgeous vista in front of me, I felt such a sense of pride and empowerment. That night, we were invited to write down on a piece of paper something that we wanted to let go. And here was my chance. So I wrote down that I wanted to let go of being a victim, of the fear, the shame, the guilt. And I took that piece of paper and I flung it into the fire. And something shifted for me that night. I really felt like I had taken a giant step in regaining my sense of self-worth. Which brings me to tonight. It has taken a lot of courage for me to stand up in front of all of you and to tell you my story. And let me just assure you that I will never forget, and I certainly will never forgive. But with the support of my fellow storytellers, I feel that I have risen to resilience tonight and taken a giant leap forward in leaving my past behind. Thank you.
You've been a messin' where you shouldn't have been a messin', and now someone else is getting all your best. These boots are made for walking, and that's just what they'll do. One of these days these boots are gonna walk all over you.
I want to thank David and Laurie for sharing their stories. It takes a lot of courage. For our final group, I'd like to welcome Sherry Flashman and Emily Haber. Emily Haber will tell us the story of Jewish yoga. But first, Sherry Flashman will tell us a story entitled On the Way to the Huppah.
It was a long journey for me to get to the marriage huppah. There were many twists and some wrong turns. I had many relationships, and some very important to me, but I hadn't been focused on getting married and having children. I'd been deep into the women's movement in the 1970s. We were challenging all the sex roles, marriage, motherhood. I wasn't sure what path my life would take. But by my mid-30s, I was still saying, I'm not sure whether I would want to have children. I decided to go to therapy to try to understand this more. It was another journey, an important one. I began to understand that my uncertainties were also related to my own experiences in my family growing up, my relationship with my parents, their relationship together. But over time, gradually, I came to recognize that I did have a yearning to have a committed relationship with a man and to try to have a family. I met Richard at a singles party. We caught each other's eye. He was a little bit older than me, but we were familiar to each other, I think from our Jewish backgrounds. But our life paths had been rather different in adulthood. Here I had been single all these years, and for years was rooted in urban professional life, community issue involvement, politics. Richard's life had followed a much more traditional path. Finished medical school, he'd gotten married, and had 2 children. And they had a settled life up in the North Shore, north of Boston, in the suburbs. The marriage came to a sad ending. They had separated, and a short time after that, his wife committed suicide. It was a tragic time for Richard and his children, but he began the project of being a single father and had made a home for them. I'd met him a number of years later, and in fact, it was a wonderful situation to step into in many ways. An already made family, I liked his kids. They were teenagers. They liked me. We were becoming friends. And Richard and I were growing in our relationship. But from the get-go, there was the question of, would this be enough of a family experience for me after all that work, trying to get to that place to want that, recognize that? And would Richard be willing to have another child to expand that family? We weren't sure about all of that. We were in discussion, but we made the decision that I was going to move into his home from my apartment in Boston. But the biological clock was ticking, and I knew we needed to get more clarity on where we were going in the relationship. I set a time frame for us to make a decision. The moment of reckoning was here. It was August, summer day. Richard and I were seated next to each other in the downstairs. I could look outside, the big glass windows, see the wooded area outside, and I could hear some birds out there. But it was very quiet inside. Richard said to me, "Sherry, I would have kept going on this way, but you've asked me to make more of a commitment. And with echoes from my marriage and some of my questions, I don't think I can make that commitment to expand a family and to get married." I, in the meantime, had come to the place of deciding, in a difficult way, as lovely as the experience had been with Richard and his kids and how much we did all care for each other, that I did yearn for something more, that I did hope to have a child with a partner. The next day, I began moving the boxes with my belongings out to my car. Alone, sad, very disappointed. But in that time, there were friends who rallied around me and really helped me out. First was Fran. Fran offered me a place to stay in her condo in Jamaica Plain with her little 6-month-old Juliana baby that she had adopted in Peru. And she offered me the pull-out couch in the living room. It got pulled in and out every day, and for longer than either Fran or I had thought. Little Juliana would run around me when I'd do my yoga stretchers, and I became Tia Sherry to her, Aunt Sherry. We shared some wonderful moments together, and Fran and I laughed a lot in our conversations. My birthday was coming up, September 27th. I was going to be 40 years old. I was having a hard time thinking about how to celebrate that. It wasn't where I wanted to be at that time in my life, but my dear friend Peggy wanted to be sure that we did something. And I ended up inviting a group of 12, 15 good friends, people from work, old friends, to gather. We sat at a table in a Chinese restaurant in town, and I wrote a few words to thank people for having supported me and being there for that celebration. And at the end of my remarks, I sang the lyrics from the Beatles song. "I'll get by with a little help from my friends. Gonna try with a little help from my friends." It was a good night. I continued to look for a home for myself, and I did end up buying a condo in Jamaica Plain, and I had also started dating again. It's a couple of years later, and Fran and I went up to the White Mountains in New Hampshire, the World Fellowship Center, Progressive Retreat Center, and for a long weekend. It was Friday night. Some enchanted evening, you will meet a stranger, you will meet a stranger, you know, across the crowded room. And it was the ice cream social in the farmhouse. I saw a woman who I'd met the year before. She was talking to a couple of fellows and sort of curious, and she invited me into the conversation. One of them was tall, lanky, a bit older. His name was Jack. The other was trim, good-looking, but he was Jewish. His name was Lee Cranberg. The next morning, at breakfast, I sat next to Lee at the family-style dining area, and we started talking and realized we shared interests, and some in progressive Jewish organizations and activities in Boston. A little later that day, I pulled Muriel, who had introduced us, aside. I had a couple of questions. Muriel, is he gay? No. Is he single? Yeah. The end of that weekend, Lee and I planned to meet up in Boston. We took a risk with each other. Lee wanted a family too. Both of us had had an involvement with somebody else, but those folks were out of the country. Lee and I were in Boston. We made a decision to say goodbye to those other relationships and to really see if we could make a possible commitment to each other. Within 2 years, Lee and I walked down the aisle and we exchanged our vows under the marriage huppah at a big, joyous Jewish wedding. It was the beginning of our marriage and soon the growth of our family with Julian and then Rihanna. And since that time, we've shared the joys and the challenges of marriage and family life, the ups and downs. Exactly what I wanted.
Someone may be laughing. You may see her laughing across a crowded room, night after night, strange as it seems. Sound of her laughter is gonna sing in all your dreams. Who can explain it? Who's gonna say why? Fools give you reasons, other men never try. Some enchanted evening when you find your true.
You settle, you don't select. You settle, you don't select. Kind of a strange life motto. Not one that I would suggest for, let's say, choosing your life partner or even deciding what flavor ice cream you should get at J.P. Lick's. But it was a life philosophy upon which I was raised. Well, at least when it came to clothing shopping. You see, I was raised among the racks and the dressing rooms of Lohman's in Rego Park, Queens. And for those of you that don't know Lohman's, it was a chain of women's clothing stores where fashion-conscious women could find designer clothing at less than department store prices. Famous for their dressing rooms, which was eulogized by others when the stores closed in 2014, they were a huge, big open room with mirrors all around. And women of all shapes and sizes would try on their clothing out in the open in front of each other. There was nowhere to hide. There was a community of women packed in that room, and many of them would share their opinions freely. Think about a room full of bubbies. Darling, you look wonderful in that. It's not really right for you, or honey, that's not your color. And I would send my mother, my personal shopper, scurrying back out to the racks to pick out another color or size. And the women would be watching because maybe I was about to reject something they wanted and they might pounce on it before it even hit the discard rack. And me being a very skinny, completely flat-chested teenager, I did not even weigh 100 pounds when I graduated from college, was given a front row seat into what my future body might look like. There were some very impressive breasts in that room, not to mention the bellies and the thighs. And I might look in the mirror, kind of turning this way and that, and then ask my mother, does this make me look fat? I did not understand about body shaming at that time. And to this day, I pull my lips in when I'm putting on a top or a sweater so as to not get my lipstick, which I do not even wear, on my clothing. And if it was a really special occasion, we might visit the back room, where the more exclusive brands were kept. But that was pretty unusual because even at Lohman's prices, the back room was a little bit fancy for us. There was a shared dressing room, but it was quieter and emptier in there. You see, you were kind of getting one step closer to Saks Fifth Avenue in that room. And the thing is, my mother could have afforded to shop elsewhere, but for her, that would have been an uncomfortable extravagance. For you see, shopping at Lohman's was a significant step up for her from shopping with her mother. My maternal grandmother emigrated to the United States in the early 1900s from Eastern Europe with her family. They were escaping pogroms and harsh shtetl life to build a better future. But affluence did not come in that generation. So when my mother needed a special dress, she and my grandmother would head down to the Lower East Side. My mother would pick out a dress, but it was not purchased. She would take out a piece of paper and she would sketch the dress. And then she and my grandmother would go to the fabric store and they'd buy the fabrics and the notions, head back up to the Bronx where my grandmother would sit at her sewing machine and she would make the dress for my mother. So you see, shopping at Lohman's really was a step up. But the thread was still there because we might find a really great, let's say, Ralph Lauren jacket that wasn't exactly my size. We'd buy it anyway. My mother would take it apart and she would alter it at her trusty Singer sewing machine, and then it was mine to wear. When I think back on some of my youthful clothing choices, I think maybe I dressed a little like a middle-aged woman, and I'm not sure my clothing always fit me that well, but hey, it was Ralph Lauren. The thing is, though, you couldn't go to Lohman's expecting to purchase, let's say, a business suit for an interview, or a dress or outfit for which you had a particular vision in mind. Maybe you saw it in a magazine. No. You got what you weren't necessarily looking for. Or as I said, you settled. You didn't select. You know, as I grew older, I thought about this and I thought, you know what? Maybe that kind of makes sense because the Jewish people have had to know how to settle and not select for thousands of years. For so much time in history, we couldn't decide where we wanted to live or what we could do for a living. We had to take what was available to us. And maybe that served us well because you have to learn how to be happy and grateful for what you have, even if it's not exactly what you're looking for. So I can hem pants and I can sew buttons, but that's as far as my sewing skills go. I bought a sewing machine once, but alas, it sits in my attic unused by me. I have 2 wonderful sons, but Lohman's never had a men's department. Turns out they like really nice clothing, and they even know how to shop for quality on sale, so I think they got that bargain hunter gene from their grandmother. And the last time I can recall shopping at Lohman's actually was towards the end of my maternity leave with my first son, my older son. I was going to be going back to work soon, and none of my clothing fit my post-pregnancy body, and I was beginning to panic. What was I going to do? It was obvious. We packed the car up, drove from Boston down to New York. My mother and I whisked off to Lohman's with my 3-month-old baby in tow. We picked out some outfits, headed back to the sewing machine. We had to let the waist out a little bit, but at least I wouldn't be going to work in my sweatpants. Who knew 28 years later we would all be going to work in our sweatpants? And in this crazy year, on the glorious morning of January 21st, I sat down to breakfast, feeling hope for our country after 4 long years. We have a new president, a new vice president. I got a text from my oldest friend. Helen and I grew up across the street from each other in Queens. And while she also came from humble Jewish roots, her mother took her shopping to Bloomingdale's and B. Altman's. And for that, I was always a little bit jealous. But Helen knew from whence I came. And so the text she sent me that morning was of the now very familiar image of Bernie in his mittens at the inauguration. And the caption said, "In Jewish yoga,
This pose is waiting for my wife at Loman's.
I laughed so hard I spit my milk across the table, and all of these sweet memories of settling and not selecting at Loman's came rushing back. I want to wish a very happy Mother's Day to all the mothers, mother-in-laws, grandmothers, and bubbies out there. Thank you.
Wow, Jocelyn, what incredible stories we just heard. I don't know about you, but my resiliency is definitely shored up.
Absolutely. I'm standing in awe of our amazing storytellers. This has been a fabulous evening, and it's not over yet. Before we transition into our performance party, which includes a breakout room, conversation, or dance party, we want to say a hearty thank you to all our storytellers and Dana, and to all of you for being here.
Yes, tonight was so special because we are together, certainly in spirit, if not all together physically in person. And there is still time to make a gift, maybe in tribute to one or all of our storytellers. You can give on our website at www.templehbt.org by clicking on the word donate at the top of the page.
And now it's time to continue the party. You can either stay right here to join the virtual dance party that DJ Huppah will be hosting, or if you prefer, you can join others in a quiet breakout room to share conversation about resilience. To join the breakout room, click on the Breakout Rooms tab at the bottom of your screen, and then click on the blue number to the right of the Room 1 tab. Thank you again for joining us at our Rising with Resilience Story Slam. Have a great night and hope to see you soon.
Think about it. There must be a higher love down in the heart or hidden.
Let's take those mocktails and spike them. Stand on up. We're gonna have some fun celebrating these amazing stories of resilience that give us strength, give us hope, inspire us. Let's dance and party. Let's celebrate.
We walk the line and try to see, falling behind what could be. Oh, oh, bring me a higher love. Bring me a higher love. Oh, bring me a higher love. Where's that higher love? I keep thinking of.
how the story goes. She knows she's got everything that a woman needs to get a man. Yeah, yeah. How can she lose with the stuff she used? 36, 24, 36. What a winning hand, 'cause she's a brick house. She's mighty, mighty, just letting it all hang out. And she's a brick house. Now, like ladies, that's a fact. Ain't holding nothing back. Oh, she's a brick house. Yeah, she's the one, the only one, built like an Amazon. The clothes she wear, her sexy ways, make a old man wish for younger days. Yeah, yeah. She knows she's built and knows how to please. So nothing like a strong man to his knees. 'Cause she's a brick
I said upside down, you're turning me. You're giving
Any Diana Ross fans in the house? Raise your hands.
upside down. Boy, you turn me inside out and round upside down. Boy, you turn me inside out and round. Instinctively, you give to me the love that I need. I cherish the moments with you. Respectfully, I say to thee, I'm aware that you're cheating when no one makes me feel like you do. Upside down, boy, you turn me inside out and round. Upside down, boy, you turn me inside.
Yes, this is what you think it is. This is what you think it is.
Alegría Macarena, tu cuerpo para dar la alegría y cosas buenas. Dale a tu cuerpo alegría Macarena, Macarena. Dale a tu cuerpo alegría Macarena, tu cuerpo para dar la alegría y cosas buenas. Dale a tu cuerpo alegría Macarena, Macarena. Macarena tiene un novio que se llama y apellido Vitorino. En la jura de bandera del muchacho se la dio con dos amigos. Macarena tiene un novio que se llama y apellido Vitorino. Y en la jura del bandera del muchacho se la dio con dos amigos. Dale a tu cuerpo alegría Macarena, tu cuerpo para dar la alegría y cosas buenas. Dale a tu cuerpo alegría Macarena, Macarena. Dale a tu cuerpo alegría Macarena, tu cuerpo para dar la alegría y cosas buenas. Dale a tu cuerpo alegría Macarena, Macarena. Macarena, Macarena, Macarena.
Yes, I did. To just go down and check out the show. Yeah, they were dancing and singing and moving to the grooving. And just when it hit me, somebody turned around and shouted, "Play that funky music, white boy. Play that funky music right. Play that funky music, white boy. Lay all the boogie and play that funky music till you die. Till you die. Yeah. I tried to understand this. I thought that they were out of their minds. How could I be so foolish? How could I? To not see I was the one behind. So still I kept on fighting. Well, losing every step of the way. I said I must go back.
be amazed. Big fun to be had by everyone.